Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Star Wars Outlaws is an open world game that's set in between the events of The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, which takes place in between 3 ABY and 4 ABY. It's actually a really interesting time period to set a game in because of the historical significance of this period. I was never a huge fan of Ubisoft games, and especially now, I feel like they're just slightly better than EA games, which is probably one of the vilest and most destructive gaming companies in gaming history. They've swallowed up and ruined so many of my favorite developers. My problem with Ubisoft is they release games way too frequently, and they don't really spend enough time on their games. I feel like a good open world game needs at least 6-7 years of development time. This is why Rockstar is always going to be my favorite company. I know people make fun of them for taking so long to make their games, but it's generally worth it. Like Red Dead Redemption and Grand Theft Auto are two of my favorite franchises when it comes to open world games. Ubisoft, like the first few Assassins, Far Cry, were okay. They're fun, but after a while they just all felt the same. Same thing with Watch Dogs and all the Tom Clancy games. They're just completely uninspired. So when it came to the release of Star Wars Outlaws, I wasn't really that excited. I'm not really expecting much with this game. Hopefully I'll be pleasantly surprised. I will be playing this game. I'm not going to pay full price though. I'll be doing the Uplay thing, right? Is that what it's called? Uplay? I hate all of these individual game streaming companies now. What I'm excited to see in Star Wars Outlaws is the world building and the lore. Just like with every Star Wars entry, that's what I'm focused on. And honestly, when it comes to art design and background details, usually Lucasfilm does a good job at making sure that these games look and feel like a Star Wars game. I also really didn't like Battlefront that much from a gameplay perspective, but it was a beautiful game and it felt like you were inside of a Star Wars movie. So we know at least we'll probably get that. And so guys, whether you're going to be playing this game or not, subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you can see our coverage of all of the in-between stuff, the lore, the background, all of the cool little things that you might not see on a gaming channel, but you'll see on a Star Wars channel that likes gaming. In this video, we're going to be covering what the galaxy is actually like during the time when Outlaws takes place. And then we'll also focus on what's going on each of the individual planets that will be making up the open world. So what makes 3 ABY to 4 ABY such an interesting time period? Well, basically 3 years earlier, the Battle of Yavin shocked the galaxy. There have been several smaller engagements between the Empire and various factions that were a part of the Alliance to Restore the Republic in the previous 5 years or so. Stuff like the Aldani Heist, the Battle of Atollon, the Lothal Uprising, and of course Scarif. The Yavin 4 changed everything. Not only did the rebellion destroy the Death Star and send the Imperial military plunging into a crisis, it was also a huge political win for the rebellion. For the first time in a long time, people believed that they could actually challenge the Empire and win, and this was a huge deal. I mean, the Tarkin Doctrine was being challenged. Its focus on making the galaxy obedient through fear had failed. And in the following years, the Alliance to Restore the Republic would turn into the Rebel Alliance, and their ranks would swell with new recruits. And they would actually launch a very audacious attack against the Mid-Rim known as the Mid-Rim Offensive. This was a huge offensive campaign. We're talking about thousands of ships and hundreds of different battle groups attacking many different planets. I would actually love to see this period in a series or a movie of some kind. At first, the rebellion moved quick enough to seize many Mid-Rim worlds that were held by the Imperials, and they were able to bolster their ranks with new recruits that they literally got from the battlefield. Check out Twilight Company if you want to see more details. This was a very hectic time in Galactic history. But eventually, the rebel military, which was still significantly smaller than its Imperial counterpart, overstretched its fleet's capacity to protect its logistics and supply lines, and soon the Rebel Alliance Mid-Rim Offensive became the Mid-Rim Retreat, and by 2 ABY, they were going backwards everywhere. It's kind of like one of those tech startups that believes that continuous growth at all costs is somehow sustainable. They're usually led by some tech bro / cult leader, founder, and they're really good at convincing VCs to hand them cash for their world-changing app, which actually is just, Facebook, but for dogs. So yeah, Rebels screwed up really big here, and the Mid-Rim Retreat would be disastrous for them. And it would end with the disastrous Battle of Hoth, where the Rebel High Command almost gets captured and killed. And so, by 3 ABY, the Rebel Alliance is licking their wounds. They're scattered all across the galaxy, hiding from the Empire. This is probably a good time to be in the Imperial Navy. I mean, there was a sense that they were on their way to victory and about to finally contain the rebel threat and destroy their military capabilities. This is a very different empire from the one we see in Endor. The Imperial army troopers that once guarded garrisons on remote worlds will now be replaced with fanatically loyal stormtroopers. We'll see less and less standard TIE fighters during this period and more specialized variants like the TIE Interceptor being used by the Imperial Navy. Unlike before Yavin, the Empire has now been tested, battle-hardened, and they're actually gradually evolving into a far more dangerous entity. So the Rebel fleet, as we mentioned before, has scattered in all directions after the Battle of Hoth, and they won't be regrouping anytime soon, especially with Vader's Death Squadron of Star Destroyers on the lookout for the main Rebel fleet. One of Moff Wilhup Tarkin's proteges, Commander Elian Zara, would be given command of what's known as the Hunter Fleet. This is a large battle group with at least 4 Imperial-class Star Destroyers and 14 Arcanine-class light cruisers, along with an interdictor vessel to keep rebels from escaping into hyperspace. A lot of the individuals beneath her command were actually either survivors of Yavin 4 or had family or friends on the Death Star when it was blown up. Most Star Wars fans don't realize that for the Empire, the destruction of the Death Star was almost like 9/11 to them. While Yavin 4 was a complete morale booster for the Rebellion, it only hardened the resolve of loyal Imperials who were now committed to destroying the Rebel Alliance no matter what it took. Such was the dynamic and hatred between the Rebellion and the Empire. Pre-Yavin, the Empire simply saw the rebels as scum and traitors. Now they saw them as murdering terrorist scum, which is a lot worse, I guess. Commander Zara would actually develop a signal analysis protocol, and after intercepting many rebel communications, she was able to track down several rebel fleets and destroy them. And so when you're flying around in that box ship of Druids and Outlaws, just know that the Empire is dominant. They have full control of the space lanes. Now, this game will be taking place mostly on worlds with a heavy criminal underground presence. And for all you Imperial fans that claim that at least under Imperial rule the galaxy was safer and criminal scum were not allowed to rear their ugly heads, well, you're in for a rude surprise. On the surface, the Empire looks like the Organization for Law and Order, but in truth, the government uses its bureaucracy and regulations to exploit its citizens and quash dissent. But thanks to a complete lack of checks and balances from either the media or third-party watchdog groups, a good percentage of Imperial politicians, sector mobs, and local Imperial military officials were using their political and military positions for corruption, for selfish personal gain. This could be something as simple as taking bribes from the local vendors competing for Imperial supply contracts for water and Ewok cheek rations, to literally allowing criminal organizations to operate in their territory in exchange for a percentage of what their operations generate. We know in the game, for instance, the local governors of Toshara have close connections with several major criminal syndicates, including Gorak, one of the leaders of the Pike Syndicate. We'll do a video later on more focused on the specific criminal syndicates. These will basically serve as factions that control certain territories in the game, and you can win influence with them by doing missions and stuff like that, which will unlock more access to those areas or, make it very difficult for you to travel around those areas. But basically, the Empire has a pretty cordial relationship with most of the major criminal syndicates like the Pikes, the Hutts, the Black Suns, and this was primarily because they already controlled wide swaths of territories and infrastructure, especially in the Outer Rim, which the Empire doesn't necessarily want to occupy. I mean, they might want resources from these regions. While local governors and citizens might not appreciate the strip mining of an entire planet for Dunium, gangsters and thugs were more than fine with allowing the Empire to exploit their territories for raw resources as long as they got a cut. These criminal syndicates also provided all sorts of more shady resources, like bounty hunters, assassins, for political targets that the Empire wants to get rid of but doesn't want any connection to. The Hutts also ran some black site prisons for the Empire out of sight of the Imperial Senate. In a lot of ways, the Empire under Palpatine operated like the Mafia. Palpatine didn't rely on a system of checks and balances. Instead, he had loyal lieutenants and capos, favorites who he used to carry out all of his orders. These criminal organizations were just another asset for him to use. And also, you had growing scarcity for a lot of basic goods and products due to Imperial corruption, the destruction of the economy, and also a lot of the battles were destroying entire worlds. Like the Mid-Rim offensive and retreat were very damaging for the Mid-Rim. And so the black market was incredibly important for the average citizen to survive. After Hoth, things would die down a bit between the Rebellion and the Empire, but eventually the Crimson Dawn would ignite the Syndicate War, which was a chaotic series of attacks between various criminal organizations seeking to show that they were powerful and capable so that they could win Emperor Palpatine's favor. If this game takes place after the Syndicate War or during it, it'll probably be mentioned somewhat in the background, as it really caused a lot of chaos amongst the criminal organizations and their relationships with one another. Now, as far as main characters go, I hope we don't really see them in this game. As much as I love Han Solo, it's kind of weird when we see him in a random Star Wars video game. It just feels way too forced. Darth Vader will be doubling down his pursuit of Luke Skywalker, although he'll be flipping back and forth about whether he wants to recruit his son to help him kill Sidious or just outright kill his son. In a way, Darth Vader was still afraid of Obi-Wan Kenobi's last words before he dies.
If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Vader sort of believes that by killing Luke Skywalker, he ends all threats against his own power. Meanwhile, with Han frozen in carbonite, Luke, Leia, and Chewie are on their own adventure trying to figure out how to get Han back. One of the major events of this period of time is actually Han Solo's carbonite statues auction, which occurs on Nar Shaddaa. Basically, after the events on Bespin, Boba Fett leaves with Han Solo's frozen body, but the Crimson Dawn manages to steal that body from him. Their plan was to create a gathering of all the major criminal syndicates in the galaxy and many other minor factions and sell Han Solo to the biggest bidder. This was sort of also their coming out party, a declaration to the galaxy that the Crimson Dawn was back. The auspicious meeting was also attended by the Empire and the Rebel Alliance, and what happens at the meeting is probably one of the more crucial factors that ignited the Syndicate Wars later on in the year. So the main worlds that we're going to be seeing in Star Wars Outlaw are Akiva, Toshara, Tatooine, Kijimi, and Canto Bight. So let's take a look at each one of these worlds and what's going on during this time period. Akiva is in the Outer Rim territories. It's a jungle planet known for having a wet and humid climate, along with frequent thunderstorms. The planet had actually joined the Confederacy of Independent Systems during the outbreak of the Clone Wars, and they built a lot of extensive droid factories on Akiva, the remnants of which still exist beneath the capital city of Mira. The Empire didn't have a huge presence on this world, but they had an agreement with the local satrapi of Mira, which had overthrown the previous pro-separatist government. They're basically like a puppet organization. They're also extremely corrupt, which is why there are tons of different criminal organizations operating on Akiva. Next up, Tatooine. This planet was never in the Republic or Imperial space, and technically was a part of Hutt space. But because the Hutt clans were now basically a protectorate of the Empire, Imperial forces regularly abused the planet's sovereignty and have on many occasions sent Imperial forces and even Inquisitors on unsanctioned missions to harass the locals. Although let's be honest, the local government was quite weak and Jabba the Hutt wasn't about to rebel against the Empire anytime soon. At one point before the Outlaws takes place, they annex the planet but only deploy a small garrison there, which mainly serves as a way for the Empire to keep tabs on Jabba the Hutt and continue, having dialogue with him. The Hutts would transfer most of their wealth and holdings from Mos Espa to Mos Eisley in order to hide some of their more sketchy businesses from the Empire, and this would actually lead to economic decline in the former settlement, which is why in Outlaws you're probably going to be spending more time in Mos Eisley. Next up, we have a frozen planet called Kijimi. Its main attraction is Kijimi City. We don't know much about the city's history during the Imperial era because we mainly see it during the end of the New Republic. One of the original Force-worshipping groups known as the Dai Bendu actually set up a temple on this planet, and it became a place of pilgrimage for various Force cults throughout Galactic history. The main syndicate operating on Kijimi is the Ashuga clan. We'll talk more about them in our coverage of the syndicates. They're far more locally focused than the other criminal organizations in the game. Next up, we have the windswept moon of Toshara, also located in the Outer Rim. This planet was controlled by the Empire, but as mentioned before, the local garrison has close connections to the various criminal organizations that operate there. The planet was actually known as the Gem of the Criminal Underworld. Toshara's location in the Outer Rim made it a haven for criminals, bandits, pirates, all sorts of individuals like that. During the Imperial era, Palpatine's strategy was to make sure that the major criminal organizations in the galaxy were either friendly or subservient to Imperial rule. It's actually kind of a pragmatic view to not destroy these larger organizations because you don't want hundreds of smaller criminal syndicates fighting and killing each other, creating a lot more chaos. Instead, Palpatine wanted a few large criminal organizations that were known to the Empire and therefore controllable. Lastly, we have the desert world of Cantonica and the beautiful city of Canto Bight, where tourists and hard-working defense contractors go to kick back and enjoy their hard credits in Canto Bight's casinos. Yes, there was an issue with child labor rights on Canto Bight, but it's not like they're the Jedi and employing these children as frontline combatants, right? This is a place where the most successful people in the galaxy, both legitimate and illegitimate, gathered alongside politicians and celebrities. And it's really just a beautiful story of equality. It doesn't matter where you were born, what race you are. If you're able to succeed in your respective field, you could have a seat at the craps table in Canto Bight. So there you have it, guys. That is our coverage of what's going on in the wider galaxy during 3 ABY to 4 ABY. I hope you guys stay tuned for the rest of our coverage of Outlaws. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.